Getting trained and certified in the particular platform can provide you with the great career prospects. In order to get your AWS career started, you need to set up some AWS interview and ace them. Hey everyone, this is Tejashwini from Edureka and I welcome you all to this session on AWS interview questions. So without any further ado, let's go to the agenda. So in this session, we will look into the different types of AWS interview question based on the different services they provide, which includes Amazon EC2 Interview Questions, followed by Amazon S3, Amazon VPC, followed by CloudFormation, and we have Elastic Block Storage, Elastic Load Balancing, and we will see AWS Route 53 and AWS Security, AWS Config, and finally we will see AWS Database. So that's it with the basics. Now we will look into some of the advanced AWS interview questions, and finally we will see some of the scenario-based AWS interview questions. With that, we will dive into the interview session. But before we go ahead, just make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all the latest Edureka videos. And also, if you are interested in getting an online training certification course in AWS, then please click the link given in the description box. Now, let us see the basic interview question. We'll start with the first question. Now, the question is, describe the three major categories of cloud service and the AWS products that are based on them. So, if we understand the question, they have asked the three major categories of the cloud and their products as well, right? Now, here, as you know, we have three types of clouds, right? Public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. Now, public cloud is nothing but it is a cloud computing environment that is built using the end users, not owned IT infrastructures. Now, for example, Alibaba Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, and Microsoft Azure are the few of the biggest public cloud service providers. The cloud computing environments that is built using the end users, not owned IT infrastructure. These days, public cloud don't always have free structures, because some providers let users utilize their services for free. Now we will look into the private clouds. Now, private clouds are also a cloud computing platform that are only used by one individual or a group of individuals. Currently, businesses are constructing private clouds on rented, off-site data centers controlled by vendors. Then comes the hybrid clouds. Hybrid clouds is a combination of public cloud and a private cloud, and it is an IT environment made up of the several environments that appear to be connected by LAN or a virtual private network. Depending on who you ask, the criteria of hybrid clouds might vary from their characteristics, and those can be complicated too. However, when apps can be moving in or out of many distinct yet connected environments, or every IT systems turn into a hybrid cloud. Now let us see the cloud services. Here we have the major services like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and finally we have software as a service. Now we will see each of it in a detailed form. Now we will come to infrastructure as a service. What does it mean? It means a cloud service provider that manages the infrastructure for you. The user has the access through API or a dashboard and especially rents the infrastructure. The provider takes care of any hardware, networking, hard devices, and data storage and servers. Now, if we look at the platform as a service, it is a hardware and an application software platform. These are provided and managed by the outside cloud service providers. But the users can handle the apps running on the top of the platform and the data that app relies on. Primarily for developers and programmers, the platform as a service gives user a shared cloud platform for application development and management without having to build and maintain the infrastructure usually associated with the process. Now, if we look into the software as a service is a service that delivers a software application, which the cloud service providers manages to its users. Typically, the software as a service apps are web applications or mobile applications. that the user can access via a web browser. Software updates, bug fixes, and other general software maintenance are taken care of the users, and they connect to the cloud applications via the dashboard or API. Software as a service also eliminates the need to have an app installed locally on each individual user's computer, which allowing the greater methods of group or team access to the software. So I hope you understood the answer. Here I have just given you the full explanation where you could answer just the public cloud, private cloud and hybrid cloud and their services to the interviewer. Now let's move on to the next question. How do the availability zone and the region related to one another? Here you need to understand the availability zone and the region's difference. So each region has multiple isolated location known as availability zone. The code for availability zone is its region code followed by the letter identifier. For example, US East 1A. So, when you launch an instance, you select a region and a virtual private cloud. And then you can either select a subnet from one of the availability zone or let the AWS choose one for you. If you distribute your instance across the multiple availability zone, you can also use the elastic IP addresses to mask the failure of an instance in another availability zone by rapidly mapping the address to an instance in another availability zone. Now, when it comes to region, each region is designed to be isolated from one another region. This achieves the greatest possibility fault tolerance and stability. When you view your resources, you see only the resources that are tied to the region that you specified. This is because the region are isolated from one another and we don't automatically replicate the resources across the region. When you launch an instance, you might select an AMI that's in the same region. If the AMI is in the another region, you can copy the AMI to the other region you are using it. Now we will look into the next question, that is, what is auto-scaling? AWS auto-scaling monitors your applications and it automatically adjusts the capacity to maintain the steady, and it also predicts the performance at the lowest possible cost. The service provides a simple, powerful user interfaces that lets you build a scaling plan for resource including Amazon EC2 instance, Amazon ECS tasks and indexes. Let's move on to the next question. What is geo-targeting in CloudFront? Now, if we look at the explanation, in Amazon CloudFront, we can detect the country from where the end users are requesting our content. This information can be passed to our origin server by the Amazon CloudFront. It is sent to a new HTTP header. Based on the different countries, we can generate the different content from different versions of the same content. So these versions can be cached at different edge locations that are closer to the end user of that country. In this way, we are able to target our end users based on their geographic locations. With that, we'll move to the next question. What services can be used to create a centralized logging solution? The essential services that you can use are Amazon CloudWatch logs, which can store them in the Amazon S3. And then you can use the Amazon Elasticsearch to visualize them. And also you can use Amazon Kinesis Firehose to move the data from Amazon S3 to Amazon Elasticsearch. Now let's move on to the next question. What are the different types of virtualization in AWS and what are the difference between them? Now, if we take the virtualization, it is divided into three types. That is hardware virtual machine, para-virtualization on HVM. Now, what is hardware virtual machine? Hardware virtual machine, in short HVM, it is a fully virtualized hardware where all the virtual machine acts separate from each other. These virtual machine boot by executing a master boot record in the root block device of your image. Now let us see the para-virtualization. Para-virtualization is the bootloader that boots the para-virtualization AMIs. Now, the para-virtualization chain loads the kernel specified in the menu. Now, let us see what is para-virtualization on HVM. Now, para-virtualization on HVM helps the operating system takes advantage of storage and network input-output that available through the host. Now, the next question is explain what T2 instances are. T2 instances are bursable performance instances that provides base level of CPU performances with the ability to burst above the baseline. Now, the baseline performances and the ability to burst are governed by the CPU credits. Here, the T2 instance accumulate the CPU credits when they are idle, and they can consume the CPU credits when they are active. Now that we are done with the basic level of AWS interview questions, now let's jump into some of the AWS EC2 questions. In that, we will see what is Amazon EC2. Here, Amazon EC2 is a short form of Elastic Compute Cloud, and it provides the scalable computing capacity. Using Amazon EC2, which eliminates the need to invest in hardware, and also it leads to the faster development and the deployment of the applications also. You can use Amazon EC2 to launch as many or as few virtual servers as you need. And you can also configure the security and networking and also manage the storage. It can also scale up or scale down to handle the changes in requirements, and it can reduce the need to forecast traffic. EC2 provides the virtual computing environments called instances. With that, we will move on to the next question. What are Solaris and AIX operating system? Are they available with AWS? Now, let us see about the Solaris and AIX operating system. Solaris is an operating system that uses the Spark processor architecture, which is not supported by the public cloud currently, where AIX is an operating system that runs only on Power CPU and not on Intel, which means that you cannot create AIX instance in EC2. Since the both operating systems have their limitations, they are not currently available in AWS. Now let us see the next question, that is what are key pair in AWS? Now the key pair are password protected login credentials for the virtual machines that are used to prove our identity while connecting to the AWS EC2 instances. The key pair are made up of the private key and a public key, which lets us connect to the instances. Let's move on to the AWS S3 interview questions. Now let us see what is Amazon S3 is. Amazon S3 is a short form of Simple Storage Service. The Amazon S3 is the most supported storage platform available in the Amazon, where S3 is object storage that can store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere. Despite that, it is versatility, and it is practically unlimited as well as a cost effective because its storage is available on demand. In addition to its benefits, it offers unprecedented levels of durability and availability. Amazon S3 helps to manage data for cost optimization, access control, and compliances. Let's move on to the next question. How do you allow a user to gain access to a specific bucket? Here, you need to follow few steps. That is, you need to start categorize your instances. After that, you need to define how authorized users can manage specific servers. Then, you can lock down your tags and you can attach your policies to IAM users. With that, you can be able to allow the users to gain access to a specific bucket. Let's move on to the next question. What are the storage classes available in Amazon S3? Here, the storage classes that are available in the Amazon S3 are Amazon S3 Glacier's Instant Retrieval Storage class, followed by Amazon S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval Storage class, Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Also, we have S3 Outpost Storage class, followed by Amazon S3 Standard Infrequent Access. Also, we have Amazon S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, Amazon S3 Standard, Amazon S3 Reduced Redundancy Storage. Finally, we have Amazon S3 Intelligent Tiering. Now, we will move on to VPC AWS Interview Questions. Let's see what is Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, that is VPC, and why it is used. Virtual Private Cloud is the best way of connecting to your cloud resources from your own data center. Once you connect your data centers to the VPC, that is Virtual Private Cloud, in which your instances are present. Each instance is assigned to a private IP address that can be accessed from your data center. That way, you can access your public cloud resources as if they were on your private network. Now, let us see the next question. How do you connect multiple sites to a VPC, that is Virtual Private Cloud? The hub features of VPN gateway allows the large-scale enterprises to connect multiple offices to each other, and it connects the multiple offices to Virtual Private Cloud too. Now we will see how to connect multiple sites to a VPC. Now we have different steps over here. We'll start with the first step by creating a VPN gateway. Then, after you create a VPN gateway, you need to create a customer gateway for each offices. In the next step, we need to create an IP section for VPN connection for each office. Then in the fourth step, you need to configure the routes for the VPN gateway. And in the next step, we need to configure the on-premises gateway devices. And finally, you need to test the network connectivity. By following these steps, you can easily connect multiple sites to a VPN. Let's move on to the next question. Name and explain some security products and features available in VPC. Here is a selection of security products and features. Let's see each in details. We have security groups, network access control list, and flow logs. Here, the security groups acts like a firewall for EC2 instances by controlling inbound and outbound traffics at the instance level. Now we will see the network access control list. It acts like a firewall for the subnets, controlling the inbound and outbound traffics at the subnet level. Then finally, the flow logs. These capture the inbounds and outbound traffic from the network interfaces in your VPC. Let's move on to the next concept, that is CloudFormation. Let's see the question. What are the steps involved in a CloudFormation solution? So here are the few steps involved in CloudFormation. Here in the first step in the CloudFormation is to create or use an existing CloudFormation template using JSON or YAML format. In the next step, you can save the code in an S3 bucket which serves as a repository for this code. And in the next step, you can use AWS CloudFormation to call the bucket and create a stack on your template. And finally, this CloudFormation reads the file and it understands the services that are called and their orders and the relationship between the services. And it provisions the services one after the other. Now let us see the next question. How is AWS CloudFormation different from AWS Elastic Beanstalk? Now let us see the difference between these both AWS CloudFormation and AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Here in AWS CloudFormation, it helps you to provision and describe all the infrastructures, resources that are present in your cloud environment. On the other hand, AWS Elastic Beanstalk provides an environment that makes it easy to deploy and run the application in the cloud. AWS CloudFormation supports the infrastructure needs of various types of applications like legacy applications and existing enterprise applications. On the other hand, AWS Elastic Beanstalk is combined with the developer tools to help you to manage the life cycle of your application. With that, we'll move into the next question. What are elements of AWS CloudFormation template? Here, the AWS CloudFormation templates are YAML or JSON formatted text files that are compressed of 5 essential elements. They are template parameters, output values, and data tables, resources, and finally file format versions. Now let us see the questions from Elastic Block Storage. The first question here in Elastic Block Storage is, how can you automate EC2 backup using EBS? Now, here are the following steps in order to automate EC2 backup using EBS. First, let's get the list of instances and let's connect to the AWS through API to list the Amazon EBS volumes that are attached locally to the instances. Now, list the snapshot of each volume and assign a retention period of the snapshot. Later on, create a snapshot of each volume. Now, make sure to remove the snapshot if it is older than the retention period. By doing this, you can automate EC2 backup using EBS. Now, let's move on to the next question. What is the difference between EBS and instant storage? Here, the EBS is a kind of permanent storage in which the data can be restored at a later point. When you save the data in the EBS, it stays even after the lifetime of the EC2 instance. On the other hand, instant storage is a temporary storage that it is physically attached to the host machine. With an instant storage, you cannot detach one instance and attach it to the another. Unlike in EBS, the data in an instant storage is lost if any instance is stopped or terminated. Let's see the next question. Can you take a backup of EFS like EBS? If yes, can you please state how? The answer for this is obviously yes. You can use the EFS to EFS backup solution to recover from unintended changes or deletion in Amazon EFS. Now, if you follow those steps given below, you can easily take the backup if you follow these steps. The step 1 is to sign into the AWS Management Console, and you need to click the Launch EFS to EFS Restore button. Then in the next step, you can use the region selector in the console navigation bar to select the region. After that, you need to verify if you have chosen the right template on the Select Template page. Then you need to assign a name to your solution stack. Finally, you need to review the parameters for the template and modify them if necessary. Let's move on to the next question on Elastic Load Balancing. What are the different types of load balancer in AWS? Here are the 3 types of load balancer that are supported by the Elastic Load Balancing. Those are Application Load Balancer, Network Load Balancer, and finally Classic Load Balancer. And the next question is, what are the different uses of the various load balancer in AWS load balancing? So, as I said in the previous question, we had 3 types of load balancer, that is Application Load Balancer, Network Load Balancer, and Classic Load Balancer. Now let us see each of it in a detail. Now, Application Load Balancer used if you need flexible application management and TLS termination. Now, Network Load Balancer are used if you require extreme performance and static IPs for your applications. Now, what does the Classic Load Balancer do? It is used if your application is built within the EC2 Classic network. Now, in the next question, we will see the difference between the cluster and load balancing. Here, the cluster is a method of turning the multiple computer servers into a cluster, which is a group of servers that act like a single system. And also, you can have an active to active cluster but it will require multiple instances of SQL servers running on each node. Now, what is load balancing? Here, the load balancing is about the distribution of workloads across multiple computing resources, such as computers, server cluster, network links, etc. Now, let us see the questions from AWS security. Now, what is identity and access management and how does it work? Now, the identity and the access management, that is IAM, ensures that the right people and the job roles in your organizations can access the tools they need to do their jobs. Now, here the identity management and the access system enables your organization to manage the employees app without logging into each app as an administrator. Identity and the access management systems enables your organization to manage a range of identities including people, software and hardware like robotics and IoT devices. Let's see the next question here. What are the different AWS IAM categories that you can control? By using AWS IAM, you can create and manage the identity and access management users. You can also create and manage the IAM groups. You can manage the security credentials of the users too. Also, you can create and manage the policies to grant access to AWS services and resources. Now, let us see the difference between IAM role and IAM users. The two key difference between the IAM role and IAM users are: identity access management role is an IAM entity that defines a set of permissions for making AWS services requests, while an IAM user has a permanent long-term credentials. It is used to interact with the AWS services directly. In terms of in the IAM role, it is trusted entity like IAM users, applications, or an AWS services assuming the role, whereas the IAM users has full access to all the AWS IAM functionalities. Let us see the question from AWS Route 53. Now let us see what is Amazon Route 53. Here the Amazon Route 53 is a highly available and scalable domain name systems web service. Here the Route 53 connects the user request to the internet application that are running on the AWS or on premises. The name refers to the TCP or the UDP port 53 where the DNS server requests are addressed. The name of our services, that is Route 53, comes from the fact that DNS servers respond to the queries on port 53 and it provides the answers that route end users to the applications on the internet. Let's move on to the next question. What is the difference between the latency based routing and GeoDNS? Here, the geo-based DNS routing takes the decisions based on the geographic location of the request, whereas the latency-based routing utilizes the latency measurements between the network and the AWS database centers. Here, the latency-based routing is used when you want to give your customers the lowest latency possible. On the other hand, geo-based routing is used when you want to direct the customer to different websites based on the country or the region they are browsing from. With that, I hope you understood. Let's move on to the next question. How does Amazon Route 53 provides high availability and low latency? Here we have around 3 resources, that is globally distributed servers, dependency and optimal locations. Here about the global distributed server, the Amazon is a global service and consequently has the DNS services globally. Any customer creating a question from any part of the world gets to reach a DNS server local to them, and that provides the low latency. Now let us see the dependency. Route 53 provides a high level of dependability required by the critical applications. Now, if we see the optimal locations, here the Route 53 uses a global anycast network to answer those queries from the optimal position automatically. Let's see the next question from Configure AWS. How does AWS Config work with the AWS CloudTrail? Here, the AWS CloudTrail records the user API activity on your account and allows you to access information about the activity. By using the CloudTrail, you can get the full detail about the API actions, such as the identity of the caller, time of the call, request parameters, and response elements. On the other hand, AWS Config records point-in-time configuration details for your AWS resources on configuration items. You can use the configuration item to ascertain what your AWS resources looks like at the given point of time. Whereas by using the CloudTrail, you can quickly answer who made an API call to modify the resources. Also, you can CloudTrail to detect if a security group was incorrectly configured. Let's move on to the next question. The question is like, can AWS config aggregate data across the different AWS accounts? The answer is yes. You can set up the AWS config to deliver the configuration updates from the different accounts to one S3 bucket. Once the appropriate IAM policies are applied to the S3 bucket. Now let us see the database AWS questions. How are reversed instance different from on-demand database instances? Here, the reverse instance and on-demand instance are the same when it comes to the functions, but they only differ in how they are built. The reverse instance are purchased as 1 year or 3-year reservations, and in return, you get very low hourly based pricing when compared to the on-demand cases that are built on the hourly basis. So these are the difference between the reserved instances and on-demand database instances. With that, we will move on to the next question here. Which type of scaling would you recommend for RDS and why? Here, there are two types of scaling. We have vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. Here in the vertical scaling, it lets you to vertically scale up your master database with the pressure of the button. A database can only be scaled vertically, and there are 18 different instances in which you can resize the RDS. On the other hand, horizontal scaling is good for replicas. So these are read-only replicas that can only be done through Amazon Aurora. We'll move on to the final question in the database. What is a maintenance window in Amazon RDS? And will your database instance be available during the maintenance events? Here in the database maintenance window, it lets you to decide when the database instance should be modified, and the database engine versions update and the software that patching have to occur. The automatic scheduling is done only for the patches that are related to security and the durability. By default, there is a 30 minutes value assigned as a maintenance window, and the database instance will still be available during the events, though you might not observe a minimal effects on the performances. Now let us see the advanced AWS interview questions. Here, the first question in advanced level is define the snapshot in AWS Lightsail. Now, the point-in-time backups of EC2 instance, it blocks the storage devices and the database are known as the snapshot, and they can be produced manually or automatically at any moment. Your resources can always be restored using these snapshots even after they have been created. These resources will also perform the same task has the original ones from which the snapshots were made. Let's move on to the next question. Explain Amazon EC2 root device volume. Here, the image that will be used to boot an EC2 instance is stored on the root device. Also, this occurs when an Amazon AMI runs a new EC2 instance. And this root device volume is supported by EBS or an instance store. In general, the root device data on AWS EBS is not affected by the lifespan of an EC2 instance. With this, we will see the next question. Mention the different types of instances in Amazon EC2 and explain its feature. Here we have general purpose instance, compute optimized instance, then we have memory optimized, then we have accelerated computing, then finally we have the storage optimized. So let us see these all in detail. Here the general purpose instance, these are used to compute a range of workloads and it is aid in the allocation of processing, memory and network resources. Now let's see the compute optimized instance. These are ideal for compute intensive applications. They can handle batch processing workloads, high performance web services, machine learning inference, and various other tasks. Then comes the memory optimized. They process the workload that handle massive data set in memory and deliver them quickly. And the next one is accelerated computing. It aids in the execution of floating point number calculations, data pattern matching, and graphic processing. So, these functions are carried out using the hardware accelerators. Then finally, we have the storage optimized. They handle tasks that require sequential read and write access to the big data sets on local storage. Let's see the next question. What do you understand by changing in Amazon EC2? Here, to make limit administration easier for the customers, the Amazon EC2 now offers the option to switch from the current instance count-based limitations to the new CPU-based restrictions. As a result, when launching a combination of instance type based on the demand, utilizing it measured in terms of the number of CPUs. Now, let us understand the difference between a spot instance, an on-demand instance, and a reserved instance. Here, spot instances are unused EC2 instance that users can use at a reduced cost. When you use on-demand instances, you must pay for the computing resources without making a long-term obligations. When you use the reserved instances on the other hand allow you to specify the attributes such as the instant type, platform, dependencies, region, and availability zone. Now let us see some of the scenario-based questions here. Now try answering this scenario-based question. I have some private servers on my premises. Also, I have distributed some of my workloads on the private cloud. What is this architecture called? I will give you some of the options here, such as the virtual private network, private cloud, the virtual private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. And if you know the answer, please pause the video and just go down below and comment there. The answer is the hybrid cloud. Now let us see the explanation here. So the answer for this is hybrid cloud because we are using both the private cloud and your on-premises services, that is the private cloud. To make this hybrid architecture easy to use, wouldn't it be better if your private and public cloud were all on the same network? This is established by including your public cloud servers in a virtual private cloud and connecting this virtual cloud with your on-premises services using a virtual private network. I hope you understood this question. Let's move on to the next scenario-based question. Assume your business prefers to use its email address and the domain to send and receive the compliances of emails. So, what service do you recommend to implement it easily and budget friendly? Now, the answer for this would be the Amazon Simple Email Services called Amazon SES. It is a cloud-based email sending services. So, this could easily solve the problem of sending the email and receiving the email at a instance. With this, let's move on to the next question. On an EC2 instance, an application of yours is active. Once the CPU usage on your instance hits 80%, then you must reduce the load on it. What strategy do you use to complete this task? If you have any idea on this question, please comment below. Now, the answer for this would be now it can be accomplished by setting up an auto-scaling group to deploy the additional instances. When an EC2 instance's CPU use suppresses 80% and by allocating the traffic across the instances via the creation of an application load balancer and the designation of the EC2 instances as target instances. Let's move on to the next question. Here we have another scenario based question. Now you need to configure an Amazon S3 bucket to the server static assets for your public facing web application. Which method will ensure that all the objects uploaded to the bucket are set to public read? Here are the options. Set permissions on the object to public read during upload. The next option is configure the bucket policy to set all the objects to public read. The next option will be to use AWS identity and access management role to set the bucket to public read. Finally, the Amazon S3 objects default to public read, so no action is needed. Now, comment the answer below in the comment section. Here the option is configure the bucket policy to set all the objects to public read. Here I will give you the explanation for this option. Here, rather than making changes to every object, it is better to set the policy for the whole bucket. Here, the identity and access management is used to give more granular permissions since this is a website. All the objects would be public by default. Now, let us see the final question in the scenario based. In AWS, there are three different storage services are available, such as EFS, S3, and EBS. When should I use Amazon EFS versus Amazon S3 versus Amazon Elastic Block Store? Here, the Amazon Web Services, that is AWS, offers the cloud storage services to support a wide range of storage workloads. Amazon EFS is a file storage service for use with Amazon Compute, such as EC2, containers, and serverless, and on-premises servers too. And Amazon EFS provides a file system interfaces, file system access semantic, such as strong consistency and file locking, and concurrently accessible storage for up to 1,000 of Amazon EC2 instances. Here, the Amazon EBS is a block level storage services for use with Amazon EC2. The Amazon EBS can deliver performance for workloads that require the low latency access to data from a single EC2 instances. Here comes the AWS S3. Here, this AWS S3 is an object store services. AWS S3 makes the data available through an internet. The Amazon S3 makes the data available through an internet API that can be accessed anywhere. With that, we have come to an end of this AWS interview questions. And if you have any doubts about this topic, then quickly head over to the comment section and post your questions over there. We will get back to you as soon as possible. We also have a lot more videos coming up on this topic. So you please update yourself with this channel so that you will never miss any updates from Edureka. Until then, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!